Welcome to my channel, and this is Scary Call. The night before, Emily had been awoken up at a.m. by the sound of someone calling her name. She had assumed that it was her overactive imagination and had gone back to sleep. However, at a.m. again, she heard the exact same thing, only this time it was a whisper. It said, "I'm in your house." Of course, Emily just assumed that it was some sort of sick prank. Who would be crazy enough to play such a prank? Whoever it was, they clearly had access to her home. So who could it be? Her husband, John, had been away on a business trip for the past 2 weeks. And as for her son, he was away at college and had been there for almost a month now. Plus, her home was pretty much always empty since she worked long hours as a doctor. So who could have been in her house and why? She told herself that there was a perfectly logical explanation for all of this. But when the whispering voice came again the following night, she decided to call the police. The officers arrived, and after listening to what had happened, they agreed to trace the phone number. They had never come across anything like this before, but they were willing to look into it. They found out that the number belonged to an old landline in her guest room, but the phone in the guest room wasn't connected to a line. In fact, it hadn't been connected to a line for years. The last time it had been used was right before her son left for college. This meant that whoever was making the calls had somehow managed to tap into the line, which was highly unlikely. After the police left, Emily tried to go back to sleep, but of course, she couldn't. The next morning, she got up and went to her son's room. She wanted to ask him if he knew anything about this. Maybe he had made the connection without telling her. He didn't know anything about it though. In fact, he was scared out of his wits when his mother told him about the calls. He insisted that he had nothing to do with this and that if he did, he wouldn't remember. But Emily wasn't so sure. There was something about her son's reaction that seemed off to her, but she couldn't quite put her finger on it. That night, Emily couldn't take it anymore. She decided that she needed to get to the bottom of this. She grabbed the phone from the guest room and called the number that had been calling her. Of course, no one answered. But what she heard on the other end made her blood run cold. It was her own voice. She had been receiving calls from her own home phone. But how? How could this be possible? She asked her son to help her figure out what was going on. Together, they looked around the house, but they couldn't find any clues as to what was happening. Finally, her son took matters into his own hands. He wanted to set up a camera in the guest room just to be sure. That night, they watched the live feed from the camera on their laptop. Around the end, the camera panned to the corner of the room where an old, dusty phone sat on a table. Suddenly, the phone started ringing. Was this really happening? They watched in horror as a ghost of a hand reached out and picked up the receiver. Then the screen went black. What was happening? Was there a ghost in her house? Why would it be calling her at night? And why had the camera turned off? Emily and her son were scared to go near the phone. What if picking up the receiver would bring the ghost into the room? They waited until the next morning and then called the priest. Maybe it really was a ghost and it needed to rest in peace. But when the priest investigated, he found nothing. So what was going on? Let me know in the comments below. Then click this video on screen now to see another creepy video. Or click this one instead if you want to see a really scary video. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. I'll see you soon. Bye.